okay.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
All right, you're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week. And today we've got hockey talk, and not only do we have that, but we have some of the most brilliant minds, hockey minds in my opinion, Gophers experts. We've got an all-star crew here today with us. So welcome back to the show, Alex Micheletti, co-host of the NCAA podcast and Locked On Wild. Dylan Loucks, who is a scouting and analytics guru and also contributes to Gopher Hole, and Sam Ekstrom, co-host and executive producer for Locked On Sports Minnesota and play-by-play announcer for the Gophers hockey team with Bally Sports. If that didn't amp you up for this, I don't know what else would. So definitely get ready for some good hockey talk. Now, gentlemen, it has been a season. It has been a full season, a Big Ten tournament, and it's all concluded. The Gophers walk away with back-to-back regular Big Ten season championships or champions, but also back-to-back runners-up in the Big Ten tournament, falling in a tight contest to Michigan last weekend. Now, before we talk about the NCAA tournament itself, I am curious to know each of your thoughts on that Big Ten championship game, and I have a different question for each one of you. So I'm going to start with you, Sam. Did the Big Ten championship game leave you with any worries for this Gophers team heading into the NCAA tournament? And did the Gophers show any vulnerabilities, in your opinion?
I think the worry that I would have is that they face Michigan again down the road, because that Michigan team, the last 6 weeks, they've figured it out. I remember calling the Gophers-Michigan game January 20th. And at that point, Kane, Michigan was 6th in the Big Ten. They were kind of hanging on to the, in the pairwise to the NCAA tournament field. They hadn't been able to string anything together. And from that series on, where Michigan gave the Gophers a couple really good overtime games, they split in that series. Michigan's taken off. They've gotten healthy. They were ill and injured around the holidays. They had an interim coach, and it was looking really bad. And now that they're healthy and they're getting a little bit more seasoned as this year's gone on, they have pieced all of it together. They've got a bunch of first-round picks on that team. They're the only club that's younger than the Gophers in the nation, and maybe one of the only clubs that's as or more talented than the Gophers. So that's a matchup that I'd be nervous about going down the bracket, and they wouldn't meet until the championship game. So I think that that's my one concern. I thought the Gophers played a pretty good game. It was just two heavyweights in a title match, and it absolutely lived up to the billing.
Yeah, I was there, and man, it was fun. That is, you got good hockey, regardless of the result. Now, I know all Gophers fans wanted it to go the other way, but regardless, it was one to remember, and that Rhett Pitlick goal will forever live on in infamy in my mind for the rest of my hockey days watching this sport. But Dylan, I'm going to flip it to you. What did the Gophers have to do to move past that Big Ten championship game and get right for the tournament?
No, I think, a big step was the fact that now they're all healthy. I felt like, the last couple of 2 games, I know Chesley kind of came back into the lineup, but I feel like those 2 games was still kind of like a feeling out process for him. And he's a very important part on the back end. They only have 2 right shot defensemen, so you're talking about, a lot of guys playing on their offsides. But if you look at that game, and Bob talked about it a lot, is like, that's the kind of game that they needed to happen to kind of get them ready for the NCAA tournament. And he was basically saying that they had so many missed assignments. I want to say it was McGroarty's first goal that there was 3 Gophers standing in the slot, head in the sky, not trying to pick up players and things like that. So it's little things, but it's those things that, like Bob said, that they needed that to happen to kind of push them and be ready for the tournament. And then it's just making sure you're practicing. Kinesis, they've never even really faced them. I think they've faced them once. So film session on that might be a little bit tough, but it's just getting down those little things and making sure you're boxing guys out in front and things like that.
For sure. It's definitely got to be a next play mentality, kind of a quick memory and moving on to the next step, because even though we lost the Big Ten championship game, the main goal, the main eye on the prize is that national championship, and
Right.
they have a good shot at it. Now, Alex, before we move on to the NCAA tournament as a whole with you all, I got to have fun with this one. I know that Gophers fans have been all over Twitter talking about goalies continuously kicking out the net, and it just seems to be something that happens almost too often. Is that just fan bias setting in, or do you think there has been some strategy in there for some of these goalies kicking it out so consistently?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely some strategy involved too. They want to try to slow momentum of the Gopher attack, and so they can easily just kick it off. We saw it happen in the Ohio State series here at Mariucci as well. I think with them making changes to the ice, coming here, they're going to make it switching from Olympic to kind of more of a hybrid. Maybe they'll be able to fix the pegs with the issues with that. But there's definitely some strategy involved. I wish we'd see more delay of game calls. It did happen a couple times this year there at Mariucci, but I think it definitely needs to be called more for sure.
Yeah, something smelled a little fishy to me, but in the end, like, they played a great game and it is what it is. But it's time to move on to what we're actually here to talk about, and that is the NCAA tournament. Now the regions are officially set, and the Gophers drew 2 intrastate rivalries, which can kind of maybe be seen as a curse, because you often get the best play from your rivals when you play them, whenever that is, even if it wasn't an up to par year for them. But they also drew the lowest pairwise team in the whole tournament in round 1. Now, how are you all feeling about the Fargo region? Sam, we'll start with you. What are you thinking so far?
Yeah, you would love to reserve those rivalry in-state games for, I think, a little later in the tournament, or at least spread them out so there's one Minnesota team per region. I know that they're angling for attendance, and TV ratings will obviously be very high in the state of hockey for those games. And the Gophers obviously have a little bit of bad memory about Mankato from their last year's exit in the tournament, so that could be a second round matchup awaiting them. But honestly, the team I'm nervous about is St. Cloud State. I think that Minnesota State Mankato, they've been living very dangerously close to the edge this year. I remember that at one point they were 15th in the pairwise, pretty close to the end of the season. They snuck by Lake Superior State in game 2 of their first round series. They should have lost Northern Michigan in the CCHA championship, and they've just been way more vulnerable this year because they don't have the same kind of offensive punch. I think St. Cloud State's actually a much better team than Minnesota State Mankato. Now, I'm not going to overlook a Mike Hastings group. They could go in with their experience and physicality, and they could win that game. But I think the Huskies are actually a worse matchup for the Gophers. So that's the one that I'd be afraid about. You would love to reserve that rivalry for a little later in the tournament. But I think that if you get an in-state rivalry in round 2 in Fargo, it'll be an awesome atmosphere. So even though it's just the quarterfinal, I think that's going to be really competitive. And I think the Gophers should definitely be a little wary of facing the Huskies there in that regional final.
How about you, Alex? What are you thinking with that Fargo region? I know you're an alum of Mankato, so what is the dirty details? How are you feeling? Are you feeling conflicted at all either?
Yeah, it's like Sam said, it is kind of it's unfortunate to have all the Minnesota schools in the same region. I get what the committee was trying to do too, and I think they were trying to limit travel expenses as well. I think that's a huge thing, and it's going to be a war for whoever, is in that regional championship, because, St. Cloud and Mankato, they're both older teams, and, they always get up for, playing against the Gophers. So if that, whoever, matches up against them, it's going to be a heck of a game for sure. The one thing that St. Cloud doesn't have that they had earlier in the season was one of their best defensemen, Dylan Anhorn. He suffered a freak pregame injury and was out. Is now out for the rest of the year. And they don't really have that dynamic offensive defenseman. They do have a wild draft pick in Jack Peart, but they don't have a guy like Anhorn. And so, that's the only thing that they're missing. But, both Mankato and St. Cloud, they did win the playoff championship. So they're both coming in hot, even though Mankato barely snuck in, but they both won it. So, they're both deserving champions. And, Mankato has, like Sam said too, it's not only did Mankato beat the Gophers last year, they beat them 2 years in a row. And so some of those Gophers, definitely the seniors, they don't want to have a third season ended by the Mavericks, and the Mavericks don't have a Dryden McKay this year, so that hurts too. Like Sam mentioned, not the same firepower, and a guy like Nathan Smith is in the AHL too. So it'll be very interesting.
Yeah. And Dylan, just wrapping up this regional real quick, is there any chance that the Gophers could be overlooking their first round matchup when everybody's talking about these Minnesota teams potentially meeting up in the quarterfinals?
Yeah, I think we asked Nevers about that, and he said, obviously it's going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining. If we win, then we're going to face a Minnesota school, but obviously the main focus is on Kinesis, and you never want to overlook them. I'm not into basketball, really. I've probably watched 4 or 5 games, but I thought that just happened in college basketball tournament where there's 16 seed beat a 1, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, it can happen. I know that's a different sport and such, but you never want to overlook an opponent, no matter who it is. If it's at the start of the year, if it's right now in the NCAA tournament as a 16 versus a 1, you never want to overlook an opponent, and you got to focus day by day and win the first game, and then you can start prepping for the second.
All right, Gophers fans, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Our friends over at FanDuel are bringing you nothing but the best, and they are giving you a chance at a no-sweat first bet. And what that means is if you win, you get money back because you won. You know how it works when it comes to sports betting apps. But when you lose in this case, you also get money back. You get a chance at up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you'll get a no sweat first bet. So that's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. And you can bet on basically anything out there when it comes to the FanDuel Sportsbook. Download the app. It's safe, secure, and super simple to use. Absolutely. It's the best of the best out there, in my opinion, and it is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook of Locked On. Absolutely. All right, so quick answers here. Who, when you look across the field, do you truly see as the contenders that stand out to you in this tournament?
I think Michigan's a freight train.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Michigan that's the team that no one wants to face. Denver is deep. Denver's loaded as usual. It's hard to really knock any of the top seeds. I mean, maybe I've got a little bit of East Coast bias against Quinnipiac because of the schedule they play isn't quite as demanding, but they can score a little bit. Like in past years, they haven't necessarily been as offensive minded. I think that they can score a decent amount. So those top seeds are tough. And then Boston, I think Boston, you got to lump in one of the likelier teams to get for sure into the Frozen Four. They're probably, I would say, the best 2 seed out of the bunch.
Any other thoughts from either Alex or Dylan when it comes to contenders at all?
Yeah, I feel bad for Denver. They got stuck with the hardest region, I think, for sure. That's unfortunate to play Cornell right away. That's gonna be tough. Hopefully they have their goaltender. Corona got hurt in the NCHC against Colorado College, and so we don't know for sure if he's going to play or not. So that could be a big factor. But they're just a freight train too. Mankato, when they played them in the national title game, they had a lead after 2 periods, and then Denver just poured it on in that third period. And they have they lost a lot of guys off that team. Some of them are in the NHL, but they brought back quite a few guys, and they actually have a Gopher transfer too, in Tristan Brose, who's on that team, and so they want to go back to back. And David Carl is one of the best coaches in the country, and he's under 40, so he has a long career ahead of him if he wants to stay at Denver, or maybe at the NHL at some point. But he's made that team into a powerhouse.
Like I know Sam kind of talked about it, like Boston University and how they're probably favored to get through, but I mean I wouldn't sleep on Western Michigan. Another team that I think is really intriguing is Harvard. Who knows if they can get past Ohio right away? I think that's a good matchup. Harvard's got some depth scoring. They have some really good defensemen as well. I know there's a lot of knocks on the regions and teams and whatnot, but I do think a lot of these games will be pretty good games to watch. Obviously, Michigan is probably favored to go pretty far, and who knows? We might get another Minnesota-Michigan. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the Gophers would definitely like that, because if it happened, that means they're in the championship game, and you can maybe exact a little bit of revenge for the Big Ten championship. But when you're looking across the regions, are there any regions that stand out to you as the easiest, or maybe I'll rephrase that, the friendliest path to the Frozen Four? Yeah,
I mean, Michigan's for sure. Penn State has not been playing very well at all, and Tech's been relying on their goaltending a whole lot, and right at the end there in the CCHA tournament, Northern really took it to them and beat them, and so they've been off for a little bit, and then Colgate, I don't know a whole lot about them, but it seems like Michigan set up pretty well to get to the Frozen Four there for sure.
Yeah,
I would say Allentown Regional and Bridgeport Regional.
Allentown, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead, Dylan.
No, that's what I was just gonna say too. Is I don't know much about Colgate, but like Alex said, like I want to say Penn State has had like 4 or 5 wins in their last like 15 or something. Like they've really been slumping. So even if they get past Michigan Tech, obviously Michigan knows how to play them. So I think that's probably one of the weaker divisions.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about the tournament. We're not done there, but I also want to talk about some of the individual stars. Now, the Hobey Baker, for those who don't know, is like the Heisman of hockey, and they have their 10 announced top 10, and it'll get whittled down to the final 3 at the end of the month. Now, that being said, in that top 10, there are 2 Gophers on that list, in Logan Cooley, the star freshman that has absolutely shown out this year, and also the Big Ten Player of the Year, Matthew Nyes. Now, let's go real quick around the table, and do you think either player or both have a real shot at getting into that final 3 when it comes to the Hobey Baker finalists? Let's start with you, Dylan.
Yeah, I really think so. I don't know if both of them will make it in the final 3, but I would imagine maybe one of them. And to choose between one of them has to be a very hard decision, because, they're 2 obviously highly offensive players, but like Knives brings maybe more of a complete game, you could say, like more defensive. You would think maybe he's a little bit more physical, and more recently he has been, but I think Cooley still has the edge on like hits if you want to look at that stat. But I think those 2 should obviously probably be in the final 5 if you're looking at the final 3 for it. I think at least one of them will be in it, and then probably Fantilli would be in the other one. I guess how cool would it be for the Big Ten to kind of have the 3 finalists all be from the Big Ten, and that very well could happen if it was Cooley, Knives, Fantilli.
All right, Sam, what about you?
Well, full disclosure, I don't know a lot about Devon Levi from Northeastern. I don't know a lot about Quinnipiac's goalie. Like some of these guys I just haven't seen enough to have a judgment, like Lane Hudson of Boston, Colin Graff, Sean Farrell. But I think that Nyes is probably just slightly more likely than Cooley to be in that final grouping. I'd have a hard time seeing Adam Fantilli not in that group either. And I think that out of freshmen, I think that Fantilli probably has just a slight leg up on Cooley as well. So Cooley, super deserving, but there's just so much talent here. I think Cooley probably gets left out. Might be Fantilli, Nyes, and then one more guy. But Nyes just plays that wonderful 200-foot game. He does everything right. His positioning, his ability to finish around the net, his clutchness. Matthew Nyes, I think, is kind of the definition of what you want in a Hobie Baker finalist. So I think Nyes could definitely go into that final trio.
And Alex, any final thoughts there?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I know Michigan people were upset that Fantilli did not get Big Ten Player of the Year. He had more points than Nyes, and Cooley had more points than Nyes too. So it'll be interesting, with the Hobie Baker because Fantilli's been kicked out of a couple of games, and so I'm sure sportsmanship is a part of the criteria too. So it'll be interesting to see if they factor that in with Fantilli. I think he's probably the most talented player in the country, and so it'd be well deserving if he gets it. That Hudson kid from BU is phenomenal. So I'm kind of like Sam. I think it'll be Nyes, Fantilli, and then one of those guys out east. And my money would be on Nyes to win it. I just think I think he has. Between him and Fantilli, I think Nyes has a better chance at being a better pro. He's going to be going to a Toronto team after this season. He'll be playing with some of the best players in the NHL, Austin Matthews and William Nylander, Mitch Marner. The names go on, and it'd be pretty cool to see if the Gophers can make it to the Frozen Four and get to that championship game. It'd be fun to see him win a national title and then go into the NHL playoffs. So yeah, we'll see what happens though.
All right, I got 4 final questions to wrap up this roundtable. The first is going to be a quick prediction from each of you. Who comes out as the regional winner on this day? No foresight, no other information that we have coming ahead. So if you had to choose your winner of each regional to get to the Frozen Four, who is it? Dylan, we'll start with you.
I guess I'll leave the Fargo division for last, but I'll start with Allentown. Obviously Michigan, I feel like that's probably the most confident I am in picking a winner from each division. So I would go Michigan from Allentown. Bridgeport, this is one that I've kind of like debated back and forth with. Like, I just really, I'm not a big fan of Quinnipiac. I don't really know where they were. Obviously, the games they played, the teams they played, they weren't obviously high competition. So I want to see them play against Harvard or Ohio. But I do think the winner of Bridgeport is probably either Harvard or Ohio. If I had to guess, I'll just go with Ohio, which would be a fun matchup with Michigan and Ohio. Moving to Manchester, obviously you want to go with Denver, but again, Boston University is a very good team. Western Michigan's a very good team. I don't know if that would be an upset, but I do think Western Michigan might come out of that region, and I feel like you got to have an upset somewhere. So if that is one, that would be my one. Moving to Fargo, I do, like Sam said earlier, I feel like St. Cloud probably beats Mankato. Sorry, Alex. But I do think that probably happens. And then it would be Minnesota versus St. Cloud. And we saw earlier this year that it was a really good series. I believe it was the first series the Gophers had after Christmas break. So maybe there was a little bit of rust and whatnot, but I still think they matched up really, really well. So I'm just going to go with the gut and the heart, and I think Minnesota comes out of that one.
All right, Alex, we'll move to you for your quick predictions right here too.
Yeah, I'll go Denver, and I'll say Quinnipiac, and then I'll say the Gophers, and that last region, and then Michigan. So
All right,
chalk.
Yeah, I
Sam.
think Chalk. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, quick caveat. I filled this out as if I were unaffiliated, just normal guy. If I wasn't the Gophers announcer, and I usually would do some upsets. Like I like mixing it up. I like kind of picking the lower seeds sometimes. So I'm obviously rooting for a certain team, but I have St. Cloud State coming out of the Fargo Regional. I've got Denver coming out of Manchester. I've got Michigan, and I've got Ohio State in the Bridgeport. So I've got a 2, a couple 1s, and a 3. Go
All
Gophers,
right.
though.
There it is. Now remember those Frozen Four that you chose, because we're going to wrap this thing up with one final, maybe you got some bragging rights at the end of the show if you call it all right. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about 2 things with the Gophers. First off, who do you guys think is the most important player on the roster for the Gophers to reach their peak and win a title? Just one player, and maybe a quick reason why. Sam, we'll start with you.
Well, I think the low-hanging fruit is to say somebody on that top line. So I'm actually going to go off of that a little bit. I'm going to say it's one of those secondary scorers that needs to step up, because when you're facing the defensive pressure that you'll inevitably face in the NCAA tournament, you are going to need multiple lines to contribute. So someone like Bryce Brodzinski, who I think played a good game against Michigan, he had a lot of scoring chances, and he's been coming alive really, a lot in the second half of the year. Having someone like that fueling that second line is going to help them. Like last year, they got shut out in the game that eliminated them. And I think that there's going to be so much focus against the 81, 89, 92 line that you're going to need that second line to score. So I'm going to go a little off the beaten path. I'm going to say Bryce Brodzinski is going to be one of the catalysts for the Gophers to move forward.
All right, Dylan, how about you? One of the most important players for the Gophers to reach their peak.
Yeah, Sam stole what I was going to say, Bryce, too, because, going in the playoffs, if you can get Bryce hot, that's a guy that scores in bunches. And if he scores in the first game, he's probably going to score in the second and the game after that. And that's very important. I'll go with his line mate, Jackson Nelson. Even if he's not picking up the points or the goals or anything in the tournament, he's still a very valuable player. He's a big center. He's a very good defensive second-line center. And that's a guy that they're going to need. Maybe they use that line to shut down other top lines and kind of let their, Knives, Cooley, Snuggerud line play against different lines. So I'll go with Jackson Nelson.
All right, Alex, wrap it up. Who is the most important player?
Yeah, Dylan, we all got great minds, because I was going to say Jackson Nelson because, I just think he's so crucial because he plays center. So, face-offs are wins are so important, especially in these NCAA tournament games. And, he plays an important role on that power play too. But I'll go with Justin Close. You need good goaltending to get you to the Frozen Four. And so, Justin, he had a tough game against Mankato last year. I think he gave up 5. And so, you need your goaltending to be elite. We saw Magnus Krona, what he did with Denver last year. And so, yeah, I think, for them to win a national title, it's going to come down to the goaltending, because the goals, once you get further into this tournament, it's going to be tougher and tougher to score. So you're going to have your goalie win you a game for sure.
I love to hear it. Now, this is going to be really interesting. The last Gophers question before we do a final prediction to wrap this thing up. Now, I was going to ask you who are underrated or sleeper players that could end up very important for Minnesota. And you all went deep dives past the first line. So, maybe Close was a guy that people would anticipate as the most important. But this might get you even deeper. So who is the underrated player that maybe you don't expect coming in that could be a huge contributor for the Gophers in the tournament? We'll go opposite. So, Alex, you can start that one off.
Yeah, we mentioned this guy, or Dylan mentioned him earlier, Ryan Chesley. He was playing phenomenal hockey before he got hurt. It looked like he was really making strides offensively, and I think he can help provide some offense from the blue line there. as we know, the Gophers have, I think, the best D-core in the country, and some of these guys kind of get overshadowed, definitely, just with the firepower that they have. And so I think he's a guy that's only going to get better, but I think he can help in this tournament.
All right, and Dylan.
Yeah, just kind of looking at like the bottom six, so to speak. I think there's a lot of players down there. I just feel like that fourth line, the way they play, I know they rotate in and out players like Middlestead. Sometimes Strobel gets in, Pianemi, Lamb, but they all kind of play a similar style. Obviously, that's going to be a very important line, but specifically, maybe a sleeper would be Aaron Hughlin. I think he's only got 3-4 goals this year, and that's a guy that they obviously expect to score more. But he's always he's streaky, but he does a lot of things right that people don't see, and I think when you look at the stuff that he does right, the scoring's going to come, and it's every single game. You see the chances he gets, the opportunity he gets, it's going to come, whether it's this year or it's next year. He'll be obviously very, very important for their run if they're going to make one.
And Sam.
How about Connor Kurth? I think that's the freshman that people don't talk enough about because a lot of the season he was buried on the fourth line, but he's kind of been elevated to a permanent fixture on that third line with Hughlin and Pitlick. I know he doesn't have points in 4 straight, but I think that's someone that can catch lightning in a bottle. I think he can score in a lot of creative ways. He's shown that with half a dozen goals on the year. I think he's got a little more punch than Strobels or the Pinanimis, and he's shown that he's probably played himself into a top 6 role next year, assuming they lose a bunch of guys. So I think Connor Kurth could be a quiet little spark plug for this team, and we can't emphasize it enough how important that secondary and tertiary scoring is going to be for this team. So I would count on Kurth, who I believe is he one of those Tampa or Florida products. I think he might have a chance. He might have a chance to go home to play in to go play in the arena where he might play down the road.
I love to hear it all. Now, we're going to close this one off. It's been some great hockey talk. There's going to be tons of takeaways, and hopefully people can continue to watch this as the tournament is going. But now is the time to shine. Now is the time to call your shot. There's no pandering to the Gophers audience here. I want to know the real thoughts. So the final question is, who is your finals matchup and who is the ultimate winner for you this year in the NCAA tournament? Dylan, I'm going to start with you.
I thought about this a lot last night, but I'm honestly going to go with Minnesota versus Michigan. I think they're probably the 2 most talented teams in this. A lot of freshmen. I think it was either Sam or Alex who touched on this earlier of how they're the top 2 youngest teams in the whole tournament, but they're the top 2 most talented teams, in my opinion. But just listening to the press conference and talking to players and Bob after that game is they knew what they did wrong. The fact that they walked away out of it 4-3 to them was, kind of a mini victory. I think they felt like Michigan completely outplayed them. They did just so many things defensively that were, eye-opening, but that's an easy fix for them. We saw that this year when they have games like that where everyone starts to kind of press the panic button, but then they quickly turn it around. So in my opinion, I got Minnesota and Michigan in the final, and because of the past games, I've got Minnesota beating Michigan for the national championship.
All right, Alex.
Yeah, I'm kind of like Dylan. I have Minnesota and Michigan in the final. These are the 2 most talented teams in the country, I think, in my opinion. If Denver was 100%, I might take Denver over the Gophers to reach that title game. But we don't know about their goaltender, so that's a huge factor. But I have Michigan winning it all. I just think the way that they're playing right now and how they came into Mariucci in that hostile environment and won again, 2 years in a row, and the way Adam Fantilli is playing. He's just playing at an elite level. He wants that Hobie Baker. He wants bragging rights against some of those Gophers, and so I'll go with Michigan winning it.
All right, and Sam to close.
Yeah, double-edged sword. Because if I take the Gophers, I'm the Homer announcer, and if I'll
take them.
I get everybody's arrows. But it's okay. I can take the heat. I'm going to go Denver against Michigan, and I think Michigan wins. I've said it throughout the show. I just think that they're a freight train. They've got a top 10 pick centering their third line in Frank Nazar. They're healthy, and I actually really like their interim coach. So I'm going to take Michigan to win the whole thing, and I hate it. I hate that I did it.
It's okay. I will clean it up for the fans that are just distraught by some of these takes right now. I've got the Gophers bringing it home, but I also have the least hockey knowledge in this room probably, so I don't know if you want to run that to the bank. But regardless, it is going to be a great tournament. I'm excited for it, and I'm thankful for all of you for joining the podcast. Be sure to follow all of them over on Twitter and wherever else you can find their content. They're all over the place. They're on other podcasts. They announce for the play-by-play for Volley and much more. I will drop all of their links all their handles in the link below. So be sure to follow them all. Thank you for joining. And that is going to do it for us here at Locked On Golden Gophers. Hopefully we'll see you and be talking about it from Frozen Cold.